Yes. Oh, good, even better.
Hello, test. Please all take your seats. We're about to start. All right. Welcome everyone at this session. Dear participants, I would like to welcome you all to today's side event. My name is Max van Deursen, and I'm a PhD researcher at Wageningen University in the Transport Research Project, and I will be moderating this side event today. As you can read on the slides, today's side event will be about the prospects and challenges of the enhanced transparency framework as a driver of climate ambition. And as many of you may have heard in other sessions, there is a general hope that this transparency system will ultimately help to generate more ambitious climate action. And if and how the enhanced transparency system may do so is one of the questions we will be addressing today. So let me briefly run you through the agenda for this event. So in the following section, as you can see on the screen, we will have 6 excellent speakers presenting today on various aspects of transparency in its relation to various different aspects. Each of them will give an 8-minute presentation, and I underline 8 minutes because we're with a big panel here with lots of organizations, but in order to all have a chance to speak, we really need to have the 8 minutes. So my colleague Robert will also give a sign when the time is almost over. After this section, we have a question and answer opportunity where I kindly invite you all to ask any questions you may have. So now it's my honor to introduce the speakers to you. So the first speaker is Professor Aarti Gupta. She is Professor of Global Environmental Governance at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Her research focuses, among others, on questions of transparency and accountability in global climate governance. And she leads the Transport project on transformative potential of climate transparency. Second, we have Mr. Rashmi. He's a distinguished fellow of the Energy Resource Institute in Delhi. And as a former civil servant with over 35 years of experience in public service, Mr. Rashmi has been involved with climate change policy. And he was one of the key negotiators of India for climate change for several years. Third, I'm introducing you to Dr. Masumur Rahman. He is Director General of the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, an intergovernmental organization. He has also been the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the government of Bangladesh. You to Emily Ojoo-Massawa. She's Climate Resilience Lead for Africa at Mott MacDonald, based in Nairobi. And she's also an associate of the Arua Center of Excellence at the African Climate Development Initiative at the University of Cape Town. She has also engaged extensively in the UNFCCC transparency process, including in the consultative group of experts and as a lead reviewer of national communications. Fifth, we have Dr. Romain Weikmans. He's a senior research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs and an adjunct professor at the Université Libre de Bruxelles. His main research interest centers on international climate finance, climate transparency and climate adaptation, and he's the lead author of the 2020 UNEP Adaptation Gap Report and a contributing author of the latest IPCC assessment report. And sixth, we have Dr. Laode Syarif. He's an expert in good governance, transparency issues, including anti-corruption and legal reform. At present, he's executive director of the Partnership of Governance Reform, Kemitraan, a leading Indonesian national organization in the issue of good governance. It is my pleasure now to give the floor to the first speaker, Professor Aarti Gupta. Please, the floor is yours.
The volume is right, not screaming too loudly. Thank you very much. Thank you also all for being here. Can we have the first slide, please? So let's see if this works. Okay, great. So I just wanted to share with you in this agenda. Our focus here is on the transparency and the link to climate action. And I wanted to share in my 8 minutes a little bit about a 5-year research project that I run at Wageningen University in the Netherlands called TransGov. And the question of TransGov is what is the transformative potential of transparency in global climate governance? Because as you know here better than most other audiences, the Paris Agreement calls for an enhanced transparency framework. And the key assumption of this enhanced transparency framework is that transparency will enhance accountability, foster mutual trust, and in that way also lead to more informed climate decisions, and including in the global context, but also domestically in the national context. So these are assumptions that are very widely made. But the question, of course, is whether transparency is living up to this transformative potential. And there's actually very little empirical research on this. What are the effects of transparency in practice, both in a global UNFCCC context and in various domestic settings? And that's the question that TransGov tries to answer. And we think it's a very important set of questions because transparency is ever more central to this UNFCCC process. As you know, it's one of the only legally binding obligations of the Paris Agreement. And the reporting infrastructures are rapidly expanding. So it's very important to look at, well, what effect actually is all of this transparency having. Next slide, please. So how does one go about studying the effects of transparency in this global context? At TransGov, we have a number of key research themes, and the first column is really sort of our overarching questions. The first thing we are interested in is to examine what is the nature of engagement in these UNFCCC transparency processes. To what extent are countries participating, and are there patterns of participation? And once we have a sense of that, we can then ask the question, what do these trends and patterns of participation then mean for accountability and trust and ambition? And we come to these questions also not just a clean slate, but with a number of propositions that derive from some earlier work I've done on transparency. And here the idea is that transparency could in fact be very empowering, because there's a lot of course, what you can't know, you can't act upon, and what you measure is what you treasure, etc. So there's a lot of assumptions about the good that transparency can do. But in this contested political context, we also want to ask whether in fact a focus on reporting can become a distraction from actually taking action, or whether transparency might even become a site of politics where the same sorts of contestations that we see in the broader political arena are reflected back in the scope of the transparency arrangements. So with those sorts of questions, we study these effects of transparency, and we also have a number of sub-themes. So we look at, for example, the political effects of capacity building for climate transparency. So a lot of initiatives now to get countries to comply with these reporting obligations and build capacity for that, but where is the focus of all of that capacity building? Is it going towards what developing countries, for example, what their greatest priorities might be in terms of enhancing capacity for reporting? We're also interested in looking at transparency around climate finance and official reporting. Does it actually tell us about finance provided, received, needed, and enhance accountability of trust? So I'm guessing, you might have a sense of what the answer to that is. And also here, if you were here last week, there was Algo presenting climate trace, etc. We're also very interested in this era of radical transparency, where you now have satellite-enabled real-time, near real-time data on emissions, etc. And sometimes also partially generated through the private sector. What will that kind of radical transparency do to official reporting and review processes within this UNFCCC context? Next slide, please. So those are the sorts of questions we ask, lots of questions. But let me give you a little flavor of some of the research we've already done and some of our findings. So on the first theme, where we look at adherence to climate reporting obligations, transparency obligations. This is a paper we published in Climate Policy actually with my colleague Romain Weikmans, and we developed a transparency adherence index where we look at whether countries are actually adhering to reporting obligations. And our interest here was not to do a sort of policing exercise to say, well, you're complying, you're non-compliant, etc. But to really ask the question, we would have 100% compliance with a particular reporting obligation. What does that actually say about the kind of climate action that you might want to take as a country? Is there a correlation there? So that's the kind of analysis we've done. And then with the politics of capacity building for transparency, this was a paper I did with Marx and Suzanne Conrad, another Transgov colleague. And we look at really where's the focus of the capacity building initiatives for transparency, which are a high priority in the UNFCCC process. And of course, very important for developing countries where they have to comply with all of these enhanced transparency obligations. But then the question is that most of the capacity building initiatives really prioritize mitigation and greenhouse gas inventory type of capacity building, and of course that's logical because those are the mandatory obligations under the UNFCCC, especially also the pre-Paris transparency obligations, which are the ones we are looking at as well. But then that still leaves the question of what about these complex other areas which might require capacity building for reporting, but which are only voluntary, such as reporting on adaptation, loss and damage, etc. Next slide, please. So with that, I just want to end with my final slide, which is then, okay, so our research agenda is essentially to look at where does the light shine with the transparency framework of the UNFCCC, because, and the counter question is of course what is also left in the dark, what is left obscure, because who is to be transparent about what is a very political question. And so we look at, well, the what of transparency here, we find that the politically negotiated, very narrow, in some sense narrow scope of the transparency obligations prioritize reporting on emissions and mitigation rather than, for example, some of the very complex challenges of how is one to report on, like I said, adaptation, finance needed, etc., loss and damage, which was a big issue last week in the transparency discussions. But also the who of who is to be transparent. The burden of this kind of focus on mitigation, emissions, greenhouse gas inventories, etc., tends to fall on developing countries, especially those with very low emissions. And so therefore one comes back to this idea of transparency being a side of politics, where the contested politics that the political issues that one sees in the broader arena get hammered out in very specific ways within these seemingly technical transparency negotiations. And also just to highlight, well, what's left in the dark there, what is left in the dark are some of the most politically contentious issues which are off the table, such as reporting through the UNFCCC actually allowing for any kind of comparative assessment of fair and ambitious climate action, because that's there, or even any parameters to discuss how one could even calculate fair and ambitious climate action. You could imagine a transparency framework which would shed light on that. But those things are off the table. And also, of course, just as with the broader UNFCCC process, it's very emission-focused transparency. It's not production-side transparency, right? It's not about fossil fuel subsidies, etc. And again, this is not to point a finger at particular types of fossil fuels, etc. It's just to say that the production-side transparency is also not forthcoming. But with that, I think I will stop and thank you very much. There's another slide, Mark, but it's just the Transgov team.
Yes, so please let's wrap up with this final slide with the Transgov team, and thank you very much, Professor Gupta, for your presentation. Then I now hand the floor to our next speaker, Mr. Rashmi.
Can I go to the next slides?
No, you have to indicate to our colleagues to change the slides.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and Wageningen University in particular for giving me this opportunity. I start from where Professor Aarti left. and the issue of fairness and ambition. I would like to submit to you, if you can have the first slide, that enhanced transparency framework is a tool to an end. What is the end? In the ultimately under the Paris Agreement, we are all trying to achieve stabilization of climate, and that can be achieved only on the basis of the principle laid out by Prof. Gupta, which is a principle which is left in the dark. That principle is fairness and ambition. So what I would like to suggest to you that let us understand the enhanced transparency framework as a possible mechanism or tool to achieve the final goal of enhancing the ambition. Enhancing the ambition is not possible, obviously, if we don't report our actions transparently. And that was the reason. If you just allow me to take you back about 12 years back, the transparency agreement took place in Cancun, and that time there was a clear division of IAR and the ICP, which was later formalized under the Paris Agreement, where it became a legally binding obligation for everyone. So this transparency, which is enhanced framework for transparency, is the stepping stone for enhancing the ambition. It leads to GST. So let me come to GST. Next slide, please. Before we discuss GST, let me just articulate the principles on which the ETF needs to be built. Obviously, the principle is that of equity. And if you recall the way the Paris text is drafted, it talks of equity in the GST, it doesn't talk of equity in the ETF. So I would rather suggest that let's do some backcasting on this principle of equity and introduce this, or at least use this as a parameter for measuring the way the actions are being reported. Now, equity here is two-track. It's a two-track process here. It is not just about reporting on mitigation. It is also about reporting on the support. Article 13 includes two paragraphs, Article 5 and Article 6. Article 13, paragraph 5 talks about reporting the mitigation actions, actions on adaptation, and adaptation. Of course, Prof. Aarti has admitted that adaptation is less reported or less emphasized in the reporting process. And second, of course, equally important, equal emphasis is laid on the kind of financial support which is being provided for the countries to be able to report. So, it is important that we understand that the reporting process and the review process is also determined on the basis of equitable actions and equitable provision of support. This needs to be covered fairly and equally. Next slide, please. So what are the elements here where this equity principle needs to be ingrained? First, of course, is in the reporting process itself. Second is in the process of review and monitoring. Third, in the capacity building. And lastly, in the finance, the support which is being provided to the countries to take actions. Why it is important in each of these pillars of enhanced transparency? We can discuss this perhaps in the short time available now, but we need to understand that when we do reporting, the common tabular format which we have more or less agreed allows differentiation in the way the reports are made. Because we need to take into account the BUR, the BTR, the national communications, and the flexibility in the reporting process itself. Second is again, the next step is how we monitor this. Again, we need to ensure that we don't apply the same uniform principles for measurement, because that impinges on the ambition. Second is capacity building, which is fundamental to building the capacity for the countries to report. And lastly, a very important element of this equity-based ETF is the support which the countries provide. Next slide, please. So this I have already discussed. The relationship between the ETF and the GST. ETF is the building block. It is a foundation on which the GST is built, and we will have a GST next year. It is important that we recognize the importance of equitable actions, equitable finance in the manner in which we report this. Next, please. And then you will, can you go back to the slide once again, please? You will see, it's very interesting that in both these paragraphs, it is laid down by the Paris text itself that both these paragraphs are expected to inform the global stock take under Article 14. So, and since global stock take is based on equity, it is understood that ETF also will be equitable. Next. Why we need equity-based global stock take is the reason why there is differentiation in the levels of development. And until the developed countries which need to undertake a larger share of the global mitigation, unless they cooperate and report in the same level and in the same degree of intensity, it will be very difficult for this reporting to enhance the ambition. Next. So final slide, we need to operationalize the principle of equity in the GST. And in this process, we need to reflect on the degree of flexibility in the reporting and review of transparency channels in accordance with the principle of Article 2.2 and Article 2.1. And the last point is that this is a cross-cutting issue. It is not just relevant to ETF or to the GST. It's a cross-cutting issue. Therefore, we cannot lose sight of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashmi, and please a round of applause for our second speaker. Then we go on. Just a technical note to my colleague in the back, if you could also hold up the sign a little bit longer so that our speakers can get the cue. With that, okay. I'm giving the floor now to our third speaker, Dr. Masumur Rahman from SACEP. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Max. It's my pleasure saying something on enhanced transparency framework. Actually, Professor Aarti, they have described different technical part of the subject matter. I'd like to share some practical issues. Actually, what is happening during implementation in the national level. As I'm working in the intergovernmental organization, next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Actually, what is happening in South Asia? South Asia, it consists of, especially if I talk about the SACEP, we have 8 member states. Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, and Pakistan. So, if I show you the statistics, they are about 5% of the world's land area. And also, it's a home of 1.9 billion people. South Asia is still a predominantly society, while a majority of the population is dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. Next slide. So what is actually observed in South Asia regarding the climate trends? If we look, it's very common like other parts of the world, sea level rising, then we have the increase of frequency of sequence of floods. Recently, we can look towards the Pakistan, very recent floods. And also rapid desertification, increase of incidents in wildforest fire, melting of Hindu coast and loss of biodiversity and increasing insecurity. These are the phenomena looking in South Asia. Next please. What is SACEP? And what is the SACEP's priorities? As I told you, that SACEP is an intergovernmental organization. It's working for the knowledge sharing platform and technology transfer in the member states. Whenever any member states require any technical or any other issues within the member states, we do it very much rapidly in a cooperative way. And especially the SACEP's priority area, the climate change, waste management, sustainable component, production, biodiversity, then we have the air quality, environmental governance. All the things are now the top priority of SACEP, and climate change is one of the key areas in the region of since then, and it has been in the SACEP's work program as top priority area. Next page. So, before going to the technical part, actually today's announcement of transparency, I'd like to discuss with you the status of submission of NDC by SACEP member countries. As I told you that we have 8 member states, and the status, it's the NDC maximum, I should say that Bhutan and Nepal has already submitted their version of the NDC, and Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Pakistan and Sri Lanka have submitted their updated NDCs. And these NDCs, this transparency is coming, how their implementing process and they are, showing their integrity and all the aspects of covered and when they are practically doing these activities. Next please. So if we think about, earlier, especially in South Asia, 4 countries have their, as I told that, viewers, Afghanistan, India, Maldives and Pakistan. And among these, India has submitted its third BUR. And Afghanistan, Maldives and Pakistan have submitted their first BUR. 4 other South Asian countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal and Sri Lanka, are yet to submit their initial. So regarding the biennial transparency report, if I like to describe the status of South Asia, the picture will be supersede, the BUR for parties to the Paris Agreement at the latest by the year 2024. And side by side, transitioning to the enhancing transparency framework requires developing country to enhance their national reporting system to be more systematic and also it needs to be sustainable. Next please. So, I'd like to draw your attention here. What is the common gap between 8 member states in South Asia? Existing, arrangements, institutional arrangements, what we have. What is the gap? Which is looking in the regional areas. So if we say like this lack of stable and permanent institutional arrangement at the national level, then lack of coordination between the relevant stakeholder and the national coordination body, the lack of clear and defined roles and responsibilities, who will be doing what. It's also a very important part. Then in-country technical and institutional capacity limitations. This is very important. And also we have the communication between stakeholders, awareness, information base. Next please. Yes. What are the challenges we are now facing in South Asia region? Challenges regarding data. If we disseminate, we don't have the proper data in the site observe. And availability of data, that is also, source properly, lack of collection storage, as well as reaching. All the things are coming together and high cost. That is also we are actually and the most importantly, I should say that data sharing platform we don't have. Though there is a regional platform SACEP, we are trying to develop it so that our member states get better. Next please. This is, lastly, I like to share with you what SACEP is doing as a regional organization to minimize this in this transparency. Actually, we know that an effective transparency mechanism under the Paris Agreement requires accurate and precise MRV and GIG emission from all participating parties. The regional approach is considered effectively with the assistance of UNFCCC, ICAT, PATPA, and other donor agencies. SACEP provides an ideal platform of Southeastern countries to share information and experience along with different countries to enable completeness and quality of information and effectiveness of transparency reporting. Also, Southeastern countries to strengthen national institutions for transparency-related activities in line with national priorities. We are working to build up capacity of the member countries to understand and apply tools and meaning so that all the member states achieve their ability regarding their transparency in their climate actions. Definitely, we are providing related training and assistance to member states to strengthen existing institutional arrangement and process for MRV and policies of actions. Also, South Asia Cooperative Environment Program, whenever all member states or countries are coming, we are providing to provide peer-to-peer learning opportunities in preparing for submission of the PTO by using deadline. Finally, just by one sentence, I'd like to conclude, that is, enhancement of the transparency in climatic action. In practical sense, all the countries, national level, they are doing their best, but whenever practically they are going to implement this transparency perspective, sort of support is of course needed, and we need to look forward towards the research institution, research science policy. If we could synchronize this event, then in practical we can be very much effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, we're halfway through the presenters. I hope you're still hanging in there. We've now had three talks already relating to transparency and climate action, relating to the Global Stock Day, relating also to national level capacities and reporting experiences. We're now moving to the second half, where we also will hear about relationship with the NDCs, relation with climate finance, and also with gender. So I now give the floor to our fourth speaker, Mrs. Ojoo-Massawa. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Max. And thank you for inviting me to this event. I think I'm here by accident. I'm supposed to have been Dr. Rita, so I'm the party people. But I'm continuing that discussion that has started, and at the risk of repeating most of what has been said. The topic that I'm addressing is towards transformative climate action and enhancing transparency framework, inclusive NDCs in Africa. That is a total package that we are addressing as a whole, that there are several topics that we are looking at, and top of one that we are looking at as 3 countries in the region. But first I start with going back a little on the issue of transparency, because I think it's important that we look at the history. You all recall that when the convention was agreed, Article 12 of the convention is where the issue of reporting is captured. And with it, many parties came up with guidelines for the two sides, Annex 1 and non-Annex 1 parties. It was very clear because we had differentiation. The type of work that could be done by countries, particularly those countries in the vulnerable south, was very different from the set of reports that were done for those who were responsible for the emissions. So there was a distinction, and I do believe this served very well. And when we were doing work on the reporting, we were looking at these documents as actually giving a snapshot of the countries so that you could see what was happening in the countries in terms of climate change. At the same time, in the first guidance, parties also were supposed to indicate their needs. So at the annex of the report, the countries did put the certain needs that they requires assistance. And these were mainly in the real capacity building, setting up offices dealing with these reporting requirements, working on emission factors, such things. Those were what were in those requests. Unfortunately, that stopped, but also just to see that none of these requests were really met, because the idea was that these requests would just graduate to the junior and would be funded for that. That did not happen. And I think this, to me, is one of the first indicators that when now looking in hindsight, the question as to whether these reports really help in getting the sort of support that countries need to meet the objectives of the convention. So going forward, then we had the protocol in place. And with it were much more stringent reporting requirements for Annex 1 parties because of issues of integrity. And I think it's very important to also learn from the reporting under the protocol, because then it shows that we can actually even do better with the sort of reporting which we can get for countries. Because now we have the EFT, the previous presenters have talked about it, that we need to have transparency of support and transparency of action. As to whether parties will be able to come up and provide enough support so as to support work under NDCs, I think it's going to require a lot. Because already what you really saw is we had the initial NDCs, and I'm going to come back even as to the name national monetary contributions. But since then, countries have even enhanced and have updated the NDCs, and very little action has actually taken place in the way of implementation. So I go back again and look at when we started reporting. It's a long time. We've had several reports from the RPCC. And in the RPCC reports, they were indicated very clearly how the impacts of climate change have been increasing, particularly for Africa and the other vulnerable regions. Inequity has also become quite a big issue. Issues of inequalities are on the rise when it comes to issues looking at items like use of natural resources and all that, participation in other forums and issues of democracy and all that. That's all put there. But even now in the participation in climate change work, and that's why in the research that we have, we decided to look at participation under the industry. It's nationally determined contributions. So the question that has been asked is, so how has been the participation even nationally? And we are carrying this study in 3 countries, in South Africa, in Kenya, and in Ghana. The universities in the 3 countries are engaged in this. And we, everyone has 6 billion universities in that participation. So we have quite a big catchment. In looking at the issue of participation in the civic, I was supposed to tell you to know this. Yes, that's the study looking at the issue of inequality, social inequality, and inclusive climate action. And we realize that it's quite a multi-dimensional issue, and of course we've been applying social science in the work, and you can see that is what we're supposed to come up with that diagram over there, looking at representation in the work, in the consultations that are carried out. The first NDC, most of our countries, it's just 5 people who sit somewhere, or 2 people, and read it. We start consultating with those editors and review. But now it's really enhanced. Now we've had much wider consultations, but not as much as we desired. Now the thing which is coming out from the study issues of procedural qualities, and the way the work is being done, distributional inequalities too, also featuring quite a bit. Next.
Please wrap up because we're a bit of time. The slides will also be made available on our webpage afterwards.
Okay, so okay, I won't go into that. These are just pictures showing some of the consultations that were taking place, and we try to capture the institutions and networks that were engaged. And from those networks, you can actually see that at the end of the day, there's actually a very small peak that end up making that document, which is called nationally determined contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. All right, and we move on to Romain Weikmans from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Robert, I will be basically reading my slides, so you can keep it with my reading. So let me start by maybe highlighting a bit the relationship or the link between transparency and ambition. By revealing information on climate finance provision, the general expectation is that transparency could stimulate developing countries to increase their climate ambitions. That's how. ambitious mitigation action by developing nations depends on many factors, but it certainly partially depends on broader perceptions of equitable action by developed countries. So, if that transparency can help bring clarity on and confidence in the validity of the claims of climate finance amounts delivered, it could certainly stimulate climate ambition. But if transparency reveals that the amounts delivered are not aligned with the expectations, the promises, including the 100 billion and the needs, it could also lead to less climate ambition in the future. And in that sense, I think that transparency can be seen as a double-edged sword. Transparency on the future provision of climate finance may also encourage developing countries to strengthen the ambitions of their future NDCs if they have confidence that their climate action will receive support. But similarly, it could also discourage more ambition if it becomes clear that future climate finance provision will be insufficient. So I will briefly try to address two questions. Does the current transparency frameworks bring confidence in the validity of the claims of the climate finance amounts delivered? And will the Paris Agreement's enhanced transparency framework improve that confidence? As regards to the first question, I think everybody will have in mind that the answer is clearly no. We see everywhere in the media, in the scientific literature, in many institutional reports that there is a complete lack of trust, of credibility around climate finance numbers. And to exemplify that, I have summarized in this table 4 key sets of estimates of public climate finance from developed to developing countries. So I'm only looking here at public climate finance because private climate flows are even more disputed. It's the next slide. So in this slide, you can see, for example, that the OECD has published in recent years those reports stating, for example, that in 2018, around 62 billion of climate finance public climate finance were flowing from developed to developing countries. By contrast, we have seen several reports by Oxfam stating, for example, that in the same year, 2018, let's say, public climate finance rather reached something like a third of what the OECD publicized as climate finance, so something like 22 billion. And also you may remember also in 2015 when the Indian Ministry of Finance released this report stating that public climate finance flows between rich and poor countries amounted to something like $2 billion of dollars, and not the 40 billion of US dollars that the OECD claimed at the time. These huge differences in numbers can be mostly linked to 3 issues. First, most developed countries can't hold their financial instruments at face value when they're reporting to the UNFCCC. This basically means that the 50 million loan is equal to a grant of 50 million in the OECD figures. This is despite the fact, of course, that the 50 million loan will have to be paid back, and such repayments are not counted against the original flows. In practice, this also means that developed countries that provide a large part of their climate finance in the form of loans get their figures inflated in comparison to those countries that mainly provide climate finance as grants. Developing country negotiators and civil society representatives argue that only the grant equivalent of loans should be counted as actual support. The second big issue is that bilateral and multilateral funding flows have been screened by completely different methods for whether they target climate objective, and should therefore count as part of the 100 billion. The current reality is that almost each developed country has its own accounting methodology. Multilateral development banks have also developed their own accounting system. It has been shown many times that current accounting methodologies tend to lead to huge overestimations, which means that far fewer projects that developed countries report as climate finance could genuinely be considered as such. and accounting methodologies have been changing over time, which complicate any assessments of trends. And the third key issue still standing is the long-standing issue of whether funds are new and additional, as was promised since 1992, and this issue has still not been resolved. Because most developed countries do not reach the well-known 0.7% targets, many developing country negotiators and civil society observers argue that a large proportion of reported climate finance cannot be considered new and additional. That's an accusation that's frequently rejected by developed countries who have their own understandings of those finance. And here in the slides of the first paper, this little table here summarizes then how the Indian Ministry of Finance and some reports calculates the numbers. So, for example, Oxfam start by looking at the climate finance flows as reported in Annex 2 parties annual reports, and then calculate the grant equivalent of those loans, and then try to calculate which part of these financial flows really target climate action. So, as I briefly exemplified, the current transparency framework does not provide credibility and trust in those climate finance figures on each of these three issues. Sadly, the post-Paris transparency framework, so the new ETF, the enhanced transparency framework, will not be able to overcome these issues either. So, next slide. So, to conclude and to try to answer my second question, will the Paris Agreement ETF improve confidence in the validity of the claims of climate finance and delivery? The simple answer is unfortunately no. So it seems unlikely that the new transparency arrangement in climate finance will stimulate developing countries to increase their climate ambition. But I want to end by saying that it doesn't have to be like that. And I want to point you to a paper that we published last year, where we tried to examine all these issues and also to put forward a number of solutions. And finally, so my last slides summarize a number of publications that we colleagues have published on this issue, and this site will also be available to the world after this site. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Romain, and apologies for all the background noise, but I hope you managed to follow. Without further ado, let me introduce the last speaker, Laode Syarif, from the Partnership of Governance Reform. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll try to sprint. We are competing with a football stadium outside. Can you give me the next slide, please? So today, what I'm going to talk, it is just a footnote of different speakers, because I'll be talking about only one aspect of gender aspect of climate change transparency, which is also made based on the project activity. Because Kemitraan is accredited for adaptation fund and also accredited for green climate fund. So every project that we produce and send to adaptation fund and green climate fund, it has to have a provision of sex segregation data, comprehensive gender assessment, establishment of gender focal point at root level, ensure full inclusion of women in decision-making process, and the provision of information of accessible financial capital and loan, and also involving women in innovative technological applications, and also effective gender-related information strategies. It is too much to fulfill in one particular small proposal, for example. But this is a requirement. If you want to get adaptation fund money or the climate fund, you have to comply with those. Next, please. Next slide. Someone can help me down there, or they are playing football. Yeah. Yes. So the gender aspect of initial gender assessment, for example, what we can do, yeah, we do have that. Initial gender assessment, the provision of certificate data or beneficial data, and many aspects as actually required by the adaptation fund or a green climate fund or many other projects related to climate change. So this is make it even more difficult for developing countries to access all of climate change related project or financial climate project. So next slide, I have to go very fast. So this is actually the challenges and opportunity that I want to show you. For example, it is quite easy to make a proposal by including those. It is not easy, but at least doable. However, if you want to have like some kind of, the challenge is that whether those actual data actually came from, for example, meaningful participation or just formality participation. And this is very important. Letter of acknowledgement is sometimes easy. No objection letter, we can just actually consult it, for example. But stakeholder mapping, this is not easy. How much in particular area of the project actually, how many women, so many women leaders, and things like that. And of course, a guided formal meeting, we usually actually to have it for collaborate mapping, for example. And lastly, for example, people usually actually using survey and questionnaire. And this is actually not working, for example, in basic level, because they will not answer it. So what you need actually to empower them and talking to them. So I think meaningful participation is dependent on people being willing and able to participate and express their voices according to understanding, and I agree with that. And next one, next slide, for example, I want to show you the importance of women in some of our projects, on adaptation project in 4 different provinces. As I promised to the panel during our online meeting, I will bring some coffee that actually produced by those ladies. But after I tried, I do not have confidence to send it as a gift to you guys. So instead, I bring the premium one, so you guys want get one. I think I have enough 6 coffee. They are from the eastern part of Indonesia, the most eastern part is Papua, the island of Papua, and from Aceh, the western part from Sumatra. They are premium, and we hope that actually they can produce a coffee like this. We got, I think that it is actually 6, so any of you can actually get 1 or 7. And I have another 1 pack left for the best smile from the audience. And I thank you. Hey, lastly, this is the most important. This is the most important one. Can you show me the next slide? I want to conclude with this. I'm just echoing in yours. Enhanced transparency framework should not only obligate the national governments up to project level like me, but at the same time, the same recommendation should also apply to the whole operation of all climate change management at international and regional level. Why I'm saying that? Because the financial reporting of many international agencies sometimes it is so difficult. They are not actually feeling at national level. For example, this last month I was in Oslo and actually talking about carbon credit. And I see a lot of financiers, they want to establish their office in Singapore. And I say, do Singapore have a carbon to sell? But this is the new reality. So if you want to buy carbon from Indonesia, why don't you make your office in Japan, for example, or in Vietnam? Why don't you make it in Singapore? So the financial market of carbon, it is need to be rearranged so that can benefit all the people that actually have the carbon. And I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and well, I think the coffee is... the coffee is going around the panel. In the meantime, can we go to the next slide, because now we have some time for question and answer. So I hereby open the floor for any questions, and please, when you respond, state your name and organization and your questions. So please raise your hand if you would like to. I'll just make sure to get a microphone up to you. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm Rashmi from Brussels, from a university in Belgium. I was this morning in hearing a negotiation about transparency today. I was wondering how far did the negotiators take your own work into account about the problems regarding Article 12? Do they read scientific papers? How do you reach them?
Thank you very much for the question. Maybe Romain, would you like to take this one?
Yes, thank you very much for these questions. Yes, so if negotiators read academic publications, I don't know, and I don't know if we can expect them to read them all, but that's what we have been trying also with Gupta and other colleagues also at Bonn University, Finnish, Wageningen, is to try to make our key findings really accessible to a broader audience, and that's what we are also trying to do now, even if it's not easy. But yes, I think that the key issues, the key problems that I've tried to highlight here are well known to parties, to anybody actually in the climate negotiations, or at least in the negotiators familiar with the topic. And it remains, I must say, it remains somehow bizarre, somehow very strange to me that developed countries can still not fulfill their 100 billion pledge when they were able to spend so much to recover from COVID and so on. So that I don't have any answers, but it's very clear in those negotiations, including now on the whole loss and damage discussions, that rich countries, or maybe a subset of rich countries, are actually blocking some progress on these issues. And maybe I can just redirect you to a very recent group of researchers, which is called CSSN, that's the Climate Social Science Network, which has done a lot to try to understand all the strategies of those negotiators, but also of big corporations trying to block the negotiations on this topic of climate finance and also on loss of damage finance. So that's CSSN, Climate Social Science Network. That's, I think, they produce a lot of very interesting and accessible research. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
I think the microphone is working. Maybe just another time. Keep it close to your mouth.
Thank you very much for the question. Can you hear me? Okay. Now, the project that I was talking about, trying to determine social inequalities in climate action in the three countries, South Africa, Kenya, and Ghana. We are actually working with the national climate change focal points and the climate change committees, and then wider networks, the civil society, all those who have been engaged in some way under the climate change negotiations, and trying to also use those forums as a way of raising awareness on the need for inclusion in this work. So far, it's working very well until now. We are actually being asked to work with what you call districts or counties, the people or institutions dealing with climate change, just to give their views on what they think should be in nationally determined contribution. So it's starting to pick up, and we think it will pick up. But I don't know how far it can go, because I think there could also be, again, too much consultation may not be that good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you want a brief comment?
Thank you. Just a quick word on how the negotiations are on the issue of transparency, how will they will improve. I have looked at the negotiating text, the decision text which has been proposed by the parties. I am really disappointed the way the text only talks of voluntary reporting and review. It doesn't talk of transparency in the manner in which the actions will be supported. And as I was trying to mention in my presentation, Article 13 is about paragraph 5 as well as paragraph 6. But it seems the decisions here on the transparency framework are exclusively limited to voluntary reporting and review, because reporting and reviewing is not mandatory for developing countries, but it is expected that they will also report and review in a voluntary fashion. This is obviously disappointing. I would suggest that the party should focus on a balanced transparency framework that includes voluntary reporting and voluntary reporting information.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Maybe also just very quickly on that very important question, of course, for academics as well. What does our research actually do? How can it feed into the process? And I think for the transparency negotiations at this stage, we've sort of moved into the implementation phase. So the rule book for transparency has been finalized, etc. But there are, of course, continuous new issues that do come up. But I think if you look at a lot of the transparency sessions here at the top, they will take the transparency obligations as the starting point and then say, well, how can we comply with these? And so it's all about data challenges and capacity challenges, etc. But I think what the function we serve is to take the bigger picture, to take a step back and to ask the question about what sort of transparency and what, where the burden might come to rest. So I think that's the kind of message that we try to bring out through side events, but also blogs and vlogs, etc. And I think the other issue is not just how we bring our insights into the policy process, but to be present during this policy process to understand what sort of the key questions and concerns are within this process, which we can then step back and analyze in a way that perhaps others who have very deep understanding of the process itself don't have the chance to do so.
Thank you very much. And well, to make it complete, please go ahead.
So thank you. Finally, this I would like to, as I mentioned, if the national level implementation could be much more organized way, like I feel that there is a lack of institutional capacity where people like this. If we could develop it, simultaneously multi-level coordination and enhancement of the responsibility, especially who will be doing what during the implementation of climatic activities in the national level. That will be very much effective and responsible entity. They also need to come up with good policy as well, which is very much important for ETA. So, in the country level, in South Asia, we are talking embassy implementation. All of the member states, they have submitted the SACEP and working also. But transparency is not a simple thing. We are talking that we have to ensure first mindset, and behind that we have the institutional capacity as well. We need to develop that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's collect some more questions from the floor, and we can take two. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, mine is just like a general comment. So it's a that we move towards a more bottom-up, party-led process for reporting. And clearly, at least as far as what we can see on from the panel, is that that there is a sense that the pre-Paris conference framework and post-Paris enhancement framework is really not going to kind of, there's not much reference appreciate as far as building that or putting the trust deficit which lies. So then who kind of, clearly, I mean, from what we can see in this negotiation, past year's negotiation, I mean, I'm not very optimistic that parties can really kind of form to get that normative framework. So with whom does that function lie? Will it be UNFCCC? So for example, if we're talking about equity, I mean, who says that it is going to be cumulative GHG emissions against which, all this reporting is then compared to? So where does that function lie in the international climate issue?
Thank you very much. The second question.
Thanks. Lucas Hagen from the Wuppertal Institute in Germany. My question is to Aarti, Gupta and Mr. Rashmi. So we know basically that to achieve the 1.5 degree target, we need to transform key systems of energy, industry, transport, living, buildings, and so forth, agriculture. And each of those have different specific transformation challenges and barriers. And in the global stocktake, we're starting to see discussions emerging about those key sectoral transformations, system transformations, depending on the terminology used. And I think that's a good thing because that is what can really inspire more ambition in the next round of NECs what they're needing for. But the problem is, and here comes my question, that currently no one is really systematically assessing those transformation barriers and challenges at the national level for specific sectors. That's really a gap. Developing countries are asked in the transparency framework to report on their financial and technology support needs. That's kind of as far as it goes, but there are other barriers like political institutional barriers, capacity and awareness barriers, economic barriers, technological barriers that cannot be overcome just by transferring money or technologies. So what we propose is maybe that in the revisions of the transparency framework 28, that this could be included, that countries are asked to reflect on their transformation challenges and barriers and opportunities maybe, and so that we can have a foundation for an informed discussion about that in later stages, later global stock takes. I was wondering what you think about that. Is that at all realistic? And maybe just a reflection on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that question. Maybe we can just quickly take a third and then we'll go to the panel for
I'm coming from take one side of practitioner. What we face more is regarding adaptation. So if we need to specify what are the adaptation gaps that we have or the adaptation need, we need to specify or to report on adaptation. And there is a lot of issues related with adaptation, especially in developing countries. Of course, the very basic example, if you want to apply for the SACEP or the GEC for the adaptation project, if you say no, it is a climate problem. And here comes the issue. How can you prove it is a climate problem when all these factors interact together and maximize or minimize the climate effect and the other factors of management, other factors which my colleague said about the status of development, including also issues political like war, whatever. All this comes but when you analyze on the very bare, you will also find adaptation factors. Just the case in Sudan, where we have a lot of problems of peace and conflict because of deficit in resources, which could be also interpreted as part of climate. When you apply for a project, it doesn't come into account. And I think this is the place where the researchers here have to work on it to identify how to support people, how can they report about adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 3 questions and then we'll close it with that. So on role transparency in UPPC, sectoral barriers and challenges and how we may perhaps reopen the discussions on some of the provisions and also on adaptation in particular. So who would like to start? We have a microphone, so can we maybe call someone? Is it working? No.
Thank you for the question. I think what we actually need to address the question from the very first idea. I think I'm not opposing transparency. In fact, we have actually to push it for more transparency. But transparency it is also not only for actually the people of the developing country, but also for the developed nations. We remember all international conventions, we have this the obligation of transfer of technology. They never do it. And I am also afraid that climate finance will experience the same thing. This is very, very important. So if you want to add transparency, I think you need also to add 2 words, transparency and accountability, plus honesty. So when you promise something, that you have to pay for it. As a former commissioner of Corruption Eradication Commission, I think we got too many promises already. For example, the Indonesian case. We successfully reduced our greenhouse emission from land fire, for example. And some countries promised to pay some of it. They never do that until today, but thanks God lately, they promised to pay. We haven't received it, but Kemitraan is one of the used by the Indonesian government to transfer that money from national government to local government, to provincial government. That, I think this is the most important one. And the second, all transitions from, for example, fossil fuel base to more clean energy. Who's actually setting this narrative again? And who's are going to benefit on this transition? And how much actually developing countries, especially the lady asking for that person also. Some part of Java it is actually sinking, not to mention friends from Bangladesh, for example, or some in country in Africa. So we already experienced that. So the more requirements you put to them to respond to that already sinking state, for example, it will help us. And I think if we want to add more narrative, transparency, accountability of the promise and honesty is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. And we only have a couple minutes left, so I think these final responses will also be the final remarks. So I ask you to be very brief and maybe respond to the questions. Maybe we can start from this side, since the question were addressed specifically to you, Aarti, Mr. Rashmi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the questions. Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think they are all three excellent questions. I think on the point about, well, where does the sort of onus rest? Who will actually act to make sense of, the reports that are out there, the transparency that's being generated, and what happens with it? I think to some extent that's your question, and I think that's very important to consider, because if you look at, who's actually reading how many people outside of the transparency practitioners have read a BR or a BUR, and who's using all of this information? And there is actually a synthesis report that the UNFCCC Secretariat produces of the BRs, and that has consistently not been considered in the political process. It keeps getting bounced off the agenda, whereas it might have some overview of sort of cumulative climate actions of Annex 1 countries, those submitting the BRs, the biannual reports, but that hasn't been. So then it comes down to non-state entities like Climate Tracker, etc. They're focusing on, comparing NDCs, but the actual transparency reports, it's not 100% clear who's even reading them. And then to go to the question about whether they're highlighting sort of the transformational challenges that would be required to enhance ambition, I think that's also, that's a very important, I think to some extent that's in the conditional NDCs, etc. But in the transparency reports, it's all about actually the climate actions you're taking and how not the challenges of enhancing climate action, but the challenges of reporting on your climate actions. It's all about where is the data and how can one, so it's that focus really becomes about how can we report on what we're doing, rather than, well, how can we actually, what are the barriers to enhancing? Of course, countries can put whatever they want in their report, so that can be more or less, but it's very much project-based, sort of capacity-driven for those countries that don't have all of this reporting infrastructure in place, so that becomes the first order concern. You have your greenhouse gas inventories, etc., and that's where the focus goes. And I think I'll pass on the question about adaptation to Romain. It's a huge challenge, to know how to, because adaptation is this amorphous, very important set of issues, but how do you even begin to have metrics to report on it? And how that's then linked to finance, etc., challenging issues. Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly before we go to Romain, some final remarks.
Thank you. Just three quick points. On this issue of who will take the call. The call will obviously will have to be taken by the partners, and I think the next opportunity to do this is the GST. That is why I emphasize that we must be conscious of the principle of equity, and not just at the next stage in the GST, but to prepare for that fully. Second question about the opportunities, the transformational opportunities, and the sectors can the ETF capture it? I think not, because the ETF is supposed to look at the NDCs, adequacy of the NDC, and report it to the process of GST. I think the
place where this can be done, and this is being done with the low emission development strategies, Article 4.19, and many countries have done that. India remains its LTS. Adaptation gap. That question is extremely important, and Dr. Gupta recognized that adaptation is not fully or adequately being covered in ETF process at the moment. We are only focusing on mitigation. The instrument through which we can perhaps try and assess this gap correctly and then take some action is first fixing the global adaptation goal. We have not done that. It was supposed to be fixed in 2 years' time. A process has been started, but we have not even had any discussion, meaningful discussion on this. The NDCs are the starting point. All the NDCs, and we can aggregate the adaptation requirements through these NDCs, and that becomes our baseline for the adaptation goal at the global level. Then you assess the gap, and then you ask for that process to be taken into the business. Thank you.
Yes, and we're actually getting to the end of this panel.
Yes, I'd like to
2 words. Okay.
Because I will not take more time. As we have final position, as I mentioned earlier, that institutional capacity, which is very important to ensure the transparency. Of course, as Professor Gupta mentioned, the reporting plus evaluation and monitoring also is very important. And MRD, of course, is working. And finally, with this, ensure transparency in climatic action. First, we need to prioritize on institutional capacity and national level in the country level.
We're really getting to the end of the panel now, but of course you're more than welcome to stay around and talk to our panelists. So I hope our discussion today provides useful insights for you. And I think we heard some interesting key highlights on the enhanced transparency framework and how it may be linked to climate action. We heard that transparency can be a double-edged sword. It can be a side of politics. It's related to challenges and capacity building. And it also really matters what transparency, what kind of transparency we're talking about at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank all speakers for their valuable inputs. Also thank you all, the audience, for joining our panel today. Also thank you for those watching online through the broadcast. And the recording of this event will also be made available later on our webpage. Thank you all very much for joining us today, and I wish you all a good continuation of the conference.
Yes.